Thank you again for being here at Going Beyond the Scale. This is another what I call 15 minutes of fit, and it's really kind of a short way to look at a conversation with people that I know, that I have a relationship with, and people that I don't know, that I would love to be able to find out where they are on their health and well-being journey. Today's guest is Rob Cohn. Rob and I met, let's see, Rob, I think it was at least 10 years ago that we first met. I think it was about then. And if I remember right, didn't we first meet in one of Bob Harper's spin classes?
We did. Yep. That's when I first started going to Bob's spin class at Crunch.
Yeah. So you were always a pretty big fan, I believe, of Biggest Loser, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
For the whole time.
Wow. Okay. You and Jennifer. I knew of it and watched it, but not nearly to the same degree that probably you and Jennifer did. And what I know is that over the years, you and I've come in and out of our conversations at times, and through social media, and we've seen each other different times at some of the finales. And what I always got from you was a very warm, friendly, open conversation. And then recently, which is when I posted about you and I talking today, what I find is amazing is you're like that Benjamin Button, like literally when I look at 10 years ago and like of recent, it's almost like you started aging in reverse. And so I invited you to come on because I know you to be somebody that is open and transparent and somebody that's willing to kind of share, the challenges and things that you have. And that's what we all have. And I think really what's helpful is people like yourself that are willing to do that, because there's people that might, but many people are afraid that somehow people will think poorly of them. So from our last discussion, what I wanted you to be able to kind of do is I want to talk some about your past. I mean, just a little bit so people have an understanding of where you were coming from, what you're doing now, and we'll kind of end it on, where you're going in your mind, what's going on. So just so people have a background, so just kind of, you're living in Arizona now. You were, when I met you, you were in LA, but like, what's your backstory, Rob?
Sure. Hey, thanks, Jane. I'll send you a check in the mail for telling me I'm reverse aging. I appreciate that.
You are. I'm telling you, you are.
Thank you. But yeah, so my husband and I have lived in Gilbert, Arizona for a little over 2 years. I was actually born and raised in Los Angeles, specifically in the San Fernando Valley. That's where I spent my whole life. This is really the first time that I've lived outside of California. As far as my backstory, I was thinking back coming up to this about my childhood, because I'm 55. So when I was a kid, we all got to go out and play. I was with my friends all the time. I was outside and active. Food was not a big deal. My dad used to take me to the doctor because he thought I was underweight. And I remember my mom used to say that I had hollow legs. I could just eat and eat and eat. And then for me, really that conversation changed when my mother died when I was 2 months before my 13th birthday. And then it was at that point that I turned to food, because really in my family, nobody really had the tools, knew what to do with me. My grandmother wasn't too much grief from losing her daughter. My dad, God bless him, he just didn't have the tools.
Yeah.
And, going to food was a big thing in my family. My mother used food. My dad used food. So it was definitely a easily available substance. And that's really what I went to for comfort. And that honestly is when my struggle with weight loss and gain started, because it was shortly after that that in junior high school I started gaining weight, and then in high school is when I went on Weight Watchers, and that started the whole yo-yo of I became a lifetime member when I was in high school of Weight Watchers. But then I gained weight back. Then the Cambridge diet and the Beverly Hills diet and the cabbage soup. I mean, like all of them. For years and years and years into my adulthood. But the one thing that was always missing out of all of them, because I was always successful on the diet because I can adhere to a diet, but was really being truthful as to what was causing it. Like, what was I really eating? What was I staying away from? And for me, a lot of that, not even only just the unprocessed grief from my mother dying, but as a child, I went through a lot of verbal abuse, physical abuse, some sexual abuse, just all different types of abuse. And I was just really trying to shield myself from life. And that's really what it comes down to. And so after like going through a lot of different therapists and some metaphysical healing, spiritual healing, using essential oils. I mean, over the years, I've definitely used a sledgehammer, gotten through a lot of the layers.
Mm-hmm.
But still, the food part was hard. 5 years ago, I had a really bad fall. I had just had back surgery 6 months prior. And after that fall, my back condition got worse, just gradually got worse and worse. And I'll fast forward to December of 2019. Mm-hmm. I was in Las Vegas going to a convention setting personal goals for 2020. I was in pain. I was horribly overweight. The problem was I couldn't look at myself in the mirror or weigh myself, so I had no idea how much I weighed. I knew I probably had to lose about 60 pounds. When I came home, I still did nothing for a few weeks. And then in the first part of January, I went to get a physical. Lab tech weighed me. And anytime I get weighed at a doctor's office, they never say anything. But this time was like God was speaking to me. And the guy said, okay, Mr. Cohn, you weigh 292 pounds. I was like, what? Like, are you kidding? Like, I wanted to die. And I just thought, okay, enough is enough. I can't hide anymore. I knew I can't unknow that number. And at that point, I mean, I didn't really have any medical issues yet, although I do suspect that I was insulin resistant. Never got tested, but the pain in my back was horrible and I knew I needed surgery. And so probably about 3 weeks later, I went for my first appointment to a new neurosurgeon to give me a consultation on my back. And he looked at me and says, I can do your surgery today. But he said, if you don't lose 60 pounds before surgery, he said, this surgery is not going to be successful. He said, I'm just being straight up with you. And he handed me a handout that he had copied about intermittent fasting. And he just said, for me, this is what I found that really works. Little did he know that I had already been researching it for years. I've known about it, I think, since 2012. I just thought people were crazy that voluntarily stopped eating. I just thought there's got to be something wrong with them. But at that moment, being, was I 54 years old in horrible pain, and I knew that if I kept going, that I would manifest into diabetes, whatever, all the different medical conditions. It's just a matter of time before your body says, shut the heck up and just do something. Either way. And I didn't want to be that guy in life that, at 60 years old is on 20 different medications. And because I now have something that I can't reverse. So I just put my head to the ground and I just said, I got to do this. And I even said to my husband, if I can't figure this out, I'm going to have surgery. But I just knew I had to do something. So I started with intermittent fasting. And I started with doing like 12 hours here and there, and then skipping breakfast. I did a ton of research about it because I feel like it's something I needed to know more about, how to support my body, how to take care of my body, what minerals I need, and all that kind of stuff. As it got better, it got easier. The other thing, the big thing for me that I knew is that if I abstain from the substance, I'm much better off. Because I can do all the fasting in the world, but if I'm still eating like crap, it doesn't matter. And I know for me, I'm not a big sweet person, but you give me any other carbohydrate, tortilla chips, pizza, bread, whatever, all that stuff, like I can eat and eat and eat.
Yeah.
And I knew that giving that stuff up was my answer because I had done it in the past. The cravings weren't there. And I was successful. So I started exploring keto. And I started listening to a lot of different doctors talk about it and their suggestions. For me, it got a little complicated. I like simple.
Yeah.
The macro crazy. I figured out pretty quickly, like quote unquote keto stuff is not really that good for you.
Right.
So I stopped that. But then what I ended up leaning into, and I'm only going to put this out there because this is what I'm doing. I'm not suggesting it's the only way. People think I'm cuckoo. And and before I even say this, I was vegan for like 7 years.
Wow.
That was part of my journey as well. I looked at the carnivore way of life. And what appealed to me about that was it's easy. There's no counting of anything.
Yeah.
And I'm abstaining from the things that trigger me.
Yeah.
So there's no carbs. There's none of that. It's really just whatever animal protein you want to eat. And in the beginning, that was an interesting beginning because I never knew what my off meter was. It's like when to stop. So it's like, say, well, how much should I eat? So there's a little practice of getting your body adapted to that.
Right.
And learning how to listen to your body. I lost and gained weight during that time. But I would say from the middle of January until the end of April, I lost about 30 pounds.
That's great.
Which I was really happy about. My doctor was happy about. And then one of my crazy friends who had approached me before said to me, hey, I'm going to be doing a group Master Cleanse with the author of the Master Cleanse. What do you think? For whatever reason, I had rejected her all the years before. I said, fine. So I did that ended up doing that for 30 days. And that also was very healing. So by the time I did have my surgery, I had lost 58 pounds.
Wow. The thing that's great about what you're sharing is, a lot of times people will do a particular program and they are told if you're in a particular program, like this is what you have to do and whatever. And I think what I love about your story is that it's like we each have to kind of crack a code of a way that we're thinking, a way that our body reacts to things. I mean, there's no two ways about it. The idea of calories in, calories out, it is a math equation that does work. But I do know that if you are somebody that really has a craving for carbs or certain things, it is tough because it will mentally and insulin wise and everything else, it sets off a cascading set of effects. So for some people, they've found certain carb substitutes, certain like the carnivore. Some people work okay at paleo. Paleo is different than keto. There's also modified keto. I think the most important thing, which I think you've shared with everyone, is that you really do need to experiment a little bit, and you got to give it some time. It's not like a day or a week. It's like you got to give it some time, and it's lining your cravings, your desires, and your thoughts, and how your body reacts to it. And we, and I know we can lose a lot of weight very quickly, but it doesn't really. What I like what you've done is you've been living your life committed that you want to live life well. And it was going to take some time. And like when I talk about it, it's not perfection. None of this stuff you did was perfect. You've been practicing, and you're going to continue the rest of your life. You will practice, and you'll keep refining that. The other thing that I know that you used to do a lot of, I mean, we've talked about the food side. What's your thought process now on like moving or exercise? Do you like to do it? Don't do it? What do you prefer to do?
That's a great question. I'd wanted to for a long time. I always loved to spin. But because of the last couple of years, because of back pain, that just wasn't really an option. So when I had my surgery, my doctor just told me, he said, the most important thing to do is walk. And just walk as much as you can every day, just a little bit more every day. And here, that was in the middle of June. So here it was the middle of summer. It was hot. So the first week or two, I was really just walking inside the house. And slowly, I started taking it outside. And again, just a little, literally like a little bit every day. And I, for the most part, except for a couple of days here and there, 99% of the time, I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning now. And I've worked myself up to, I do about 2.5, 2.8 miles every morning. It's about a 45-minute walk. And that's how I start my day. And it's nice. It's me, myself, and I. I'm outdoors. I get that fresh air. So that's how I like to start my day with the movement. And then recently, at the end of December, we decided to get a Peloton bike.
Hmm.
And right now I'm doing that maybe a couple times a week.
Yeah.
And, working my way back with that up too. But I love to move. But, people get stuck sometimes on like, I have to move or exercise. But you don't. I mean, I lost most of that weight without it. So you just got to do whatever you're called to do.
Yeah.
I think, and not because you can't out exercise a bad diet either. And it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's a balance of that. It's interesting because here in the Northeast, I work part-time as a navigator at our local Y, and it was interesting because there's certain people that are there that I would see that would be working out really hard, almost every day, 2 to 3 to 4 hours. Okay, the Y shuts down, and I see these people around town. I'm like, oh my God, they put on so much weight. What it really was the fact that they were. I get the food part of it, but they had to exercise to keep that extra weight off. So I think that's one of the things that I've learned as well is even post Biggest Loser, you've got to get your head wrapped around balancing out eating well, not perfect, but eating well, moving well, not perfect. Both of those things and balancing those. I've really rarely found anybody that does one or the other without the other and seems to keep it off. So, once again, I love the fact that like what you've done with your eating, with your movement and your exercise, you've been able to balance that out. Now, we're over a little bit, which is perfectly fine, but I want to try to keep it close to 15 minutes. So we talked about your past. That was extremely helpful because I think it gives people a good idea of your story, and they could probably see some people see themselves in that, and it'll help open up some things for them. We've talked about eating and exercise. Okay, you're a young man, 55. You got a lot of life in front of you. Like with all this stuff that you're doing, are there things that you're doing or thinking or adventures or things that you're thinking about what you want to do going forward in the future? Because a lot of times it's helpful to live life well is something that's kind of pulling you to that. Is there something that you're thinking about that you're working towards?
Well, for me, one of the things that I'm working towards, and I don't know what this is going to look like yet, but it is really because, I've struggled with food addiction for over 40 years. And somehow I want to figure out how I can give back and help others that are having a similar struggle, because I know it's a common thread with a lot of people. So that's what really keeps me going is, I'm getting to that point where I don't know how long my regular career will be around.
Yeah.
So I want to do my chosen career, which is really working with people. What that looks like, I have zero idea.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that's the point. Like what we talked about today, this isn't scripted. We didn't have a whole big plan. And what you did is you've literally started on your future by having this conversation, because that's all it is. It's really all you really need to do. It's like we're doing today. Find somebody that's willing to open up, share. You learn something. I love doing this because I get to learn something from everybody I get to talk to. I learned things from you today. So you've already started with what this conversation is on your future. What I'm going to ask people to do that are watching this, whether it's today or watching it after, we've recorded it live, reach out to Rob, share, things that you've gotten from this conversation, ask him questions, and do the same thing with people in your life. Whatever you've seen Rob and I do here together, there's somebody in your life that really wants to have a conversation. Allow them to share what's going on. You'll get something from it. They'll get something from it. And I think that's when I talk about Tag You're It. That's the spirit in which the Going Beyond the Scale community has been put together, as people not trying to be perfect, but practicing and sharing. And Rob, your generosity of time today is appreciated. And I would like everybody, like I said, to comment, to share, to stay connected. And like I said to you before, Rob, I'm sure there'll be a time when I have you come back in and we'll get an update of what's new and exciting, what you're doing. So thank you again.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. And can I just add one thing really quick?
Sure.
No matter where you're at, don't worry about it. Don't worry about where you've been or where you're going to go. Just worry about now. And, a little over a year ago, I had no idea where I was going to be. And I had no idea that I'd still be maintaining the same weight that I was. So just forget about the past. It doesn't even matter anymore. Just make today count and go forward.
Wise words. Really, really good. Love it, Rob. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me.